The movie takes place in California in the year 2030. The government is desperate for money, so they create something called the Grand Lottery. At first it sounds normal, but there is one insane rule. If you win, everyone around you is legally allowed to kill you before sundown and steal your jackpot. The only major condition is that they can't use guns. So basically, becoming rich turns you into the most hunted person in the state. This brutal lottery concept is the whole setup of the film. This beginning is important because it shows us who Katie is before the action starts. She isn't a superhero. She doesn't have some secret skill that makes her instantly ready for danger. She is just a normal woman trying to get through life. And that makes what happens next even more insane. Katie goes out, trying to settle into the city and move forward with her life. She's focused on auditions and survival, not on becoming rich. But because this is a dark comedy built on absurd chance, her life changes completely by accident. Through a random sequence of events, Katie ends up holding the winning Grand Lottery ticket. And just like that, she becomes the target of the entire city. The moment people realize Katie is the winner, the tone of the movie explodes into chaos. Everyone who sees her suddenly becomes a threat. Strangers attack her. Crowds chase her. People who were smiling 1 second earlier become violent the next. What makes this concept work so well is how instantly it destroys the normal idea of society. The lottery doesn't just tempt criminals. It turns ordinary citizens into predators. A random pedestrian, a neighbor, a rideshare driver, anyone could suddenly decide that murder is worth it for billions of dollars. And that is exactly the satire of the film. It takes greed and pushes it to the extreme. The movie is basically asking, if the reward is big enough, how quickly will civilization collapse? How many people will pretend to have morals until life-changing money appears in front of them? Katie has no time to think deeply about any of this because she is too busy trying not to die. She runs, hides, panics, and barely survives the first wave of attacks. The movie plays these moments with both tension and comedy. Some attackers are frightening, but others are ridiculous. They are not all trained killers. Many are just greedy, reckless idiots throwing themselves at Katie because they see a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. That mix of danger and absurd humor defines the tone of the film. And right in the middle of all this chaos, Katie meets Noel Cassidy, played by John Cena. Now from Katie's point of view, this sounds suspicious. She has just learned that almost nobody can be trusted. And now here comes a giant stranger with muscles and confidence telling her to put her life in his hands. Of course she hesitates. But Katie also doesn't really have a better option. She is already being hunted, and Noel quickly proves that he actually knows how to fight, how to improvise, and how to protect her under pressure. So Katie agrees, and from this point onward, the movie becomes a high-speed survival story built around the relation between these two completely different people. One of the reasons the film works is because Katie and Noel are opposites in a fun way. Katie is nervous, sarcastic, overwhelmed, and constantly confused by how insane everything has become. Noel, on the other hand, is talkative, overly confident, physically capable, and weirdly upbeat even while being attacked. He treats life-threatening situations with the energy of a guy trying to win people over at a party. That contrast creates much of the comedy. Katie reacts the way a normal person would react to sudden murder attempts, while Noel seems to have accepted chaos as a normal workday. But underneath Noel's goofy personality, there is something deeper. At first, he looks like comic relief, a large, enthusiastic bodyguard making jokes while breaking bones. But as the story continues, we begin to understand that Noel is carrying emotional weight. He is not protecting Katie only because he wants money. He also has a troubled past, one connected to guilt and loss. Before the film fully reveals that side of him, though, it gives us a series of action comedy escape sequences. Katie and Noel move across the city trying to survive until sundown, and every new location becomes another trap. The city itself feels like a giant arena. Katie's status as the winner is constantly known, which means hiding is nearly impossible. At any moment, someone nearby might recognize her and decide that this is their chance to become rich. This creates one of the movie's smartest ideas. The winner cannot disappear into the crowd because the crowd is the Dongay. Wherever Katie goes, the atmosphere changes. People stare a little too long. Someone starts acting friendly in a suspicious way. A room that felt ordinary suddenly becomes hostile. Even moments of calm feel temporary because the film constantly reminds us that greed is everywhere. The city is not just a setting, it is an ecosystem built to consume her. As Katie and Noel keep moving, we also get more of Katie's personality. She isn't only frightened. She is also angry, sharp, and surprisingly adaptable. At the start of the story, she seems like someone who has been pushed around by life. But this insane experience slowly forces her to become more decisive. She learns quickly because she has no choice. Survival starts changing her. She becomes more aware, more strategic, and less passive. That growth is important because the movie is not just about escaping attackers. It is also about Katie discovering that she can do more than just endure life. At first she is dragged through the plot by bad luck. Later she begins making choices that shape the outcome. Another important layer of the story is betrayal. In a world built around money, trust becomes fragile. Katie can't be sure who actually cares about her, and who is simply waiting for the right moment to turn on her. The film uses this to create both tension and dark comedy. Even people in Katie's circle can be tempted by the jackpot. Her landlord, Shadi, for example, is not above becoming part of the chaos. This makes the movie feel more personal because the danger doesn't come only from faceless crowds. It comes from people who know her, people who smile at her, people who are willing to fake concern if there's enough money involved. This is where the film's satire becomes sharper. Jackpot is not only making fun of greed in a broad sense. It is also mocking how easily human relationships can become transactional. In this world, friendship, kindness, loyalty, and morality all become negotiable when billions are on the table. Still, Noel stays by Katie's side. He protects her again and again, often at great risk to himself. Over time, the relationship between them becomes the emotional core of the movie. What starts as a business agreement slowly turns into genuine trust. Katie begins to see that Noel is not just performing heroism for a paycheck. He truly wants her to survive. And the reason goes back to his past. As the story develops, we learn that Noel used to be part of a team, and that something terrible happened to them. He's been carrying guilt ever since. He feels responsible for lives that were lost, and that pain has shaped the person he became. His protection work is partly about money, yes, but it is also tied to regret. In a way, every person he saves is an attempt to balance a scale that has never stopped weighing on him. This backstory adds real emotion to a character who could have easily remained just a joke machine. It gives Noel depth. Suddenly, all his energy and positivity feel less random. They begin to look like survival mechanisms, ways of carrying pain without collapsing under it. At this point in the movie, the story introduces another major character, Lewis, played by Simu Liu. Lewis represents a more polished and corporate version of the same world Noel belongs to. He runs a high-end protection operation and appears far more organized, professional, and powerful. Compared to Noel's messy freelance style, Lewis looks like the perfect solution. He has better resources, more personnel, and a smoother image. To Katie, who has been running for her life through chaos, Lewis appears to offer safety. And that is exactly why he is dangerous. The movie understands that obvious villains are not always the most effective. Sometimes the scariest person is the one who looks competent, calm, and trustworthy. Lewis presents himself as the grown-up in the room, the one who can actually solve the problem. But the film slowly reveals that his polished surface is hiding corruption. Before the full truth comes out, there is a period where both Katie and the audience are tempted to believe Lewis might be the answer. He seems to bring order into a world of panic. But Noel is suspicious, and his suspicion is not paranoia. It comes from history. Then the movie drops one of its biggest revelations. Lewis is connected to Noel's past. More than that, he is the reason Noel's team died. For years, Noel carried guilt, believing he had failed his people somehow. But the truth is much darker and much more painful. Louis betrayed them. Noel had been blaming himself for something caused by another man's greed and betrayal. This twist matters because it changes the emotional stakes of the entire story. The conflict is no longer just Katie versus a city of greedy strangers. Now it is also Noel versus the person who destroyed his old life. And for Katie, it confirms the harshest lesson of the movie that in this world, the people who look the most respectable may be the most rotten. Louis is a fascinating villain because he is not chaotic like the mobs. He is controlled, strategic, and patient. He doesn't need to scream or panic. He believes he is smarter than everyone else, and in many ways he is. While the crowds represent impulsive greed, Louis represents institutional greed. He is not just another person chasing money. He is someone who has built systems around exploitation. He uses structure, image, and power to disguise selfishness. That makes him the perfect final enemy for a movie like this. As the sun gets lower and the deadline approaches, the pressure in the film increases. Every second matters now. Katie has survived random attackers, public chaos, and endless pursuit, but the hardest part may still be ahead. Because now she has to confront not just greed in general, but a very specific, intelligent villain who knows exactly how to manipulate the rules. Louis eventually forces the story into its final phase by targeting Noel and putting Katie in an impossible position. She can focus only on surviving and try to save herself, or she can risk losing everything to save the man who protected her. This is the moment where Katie's character arc becomes clear. At the beginning of the film, Katie is mostly reacting. Life happens to her. The lottery happens to her. The attacks happen her. She survives by instinct and luck. But now she makes an active choice. She chooses loyalty over pure self-preservation. She chooses to go back. She chooses to fight for someone else. That decision proves how much she has changed. This leads us to the climax, which takes place in an abandoned theater, a fitting location for a film about spectacle, performance, and public obsession. A theater is a place where people watch drama unfold, and that perfectly matches the movie's idea that violence has become entertainment. In the world of Jackpot, Katie's suffering is almost like a public event. People gather, watch, participate, and cheer because greed has turned survival into a show. Inside this setting, the final confrontation becomes wild, messy, and over the top in exactly the way the movie promises. Katie, Noel, Louis, and the surrounding chaos all collide. There are fights, betrayals, reversals, and moments where the balance of power shifts quickly. The film never wants the climax to feel clean or elegant. It wants it to feel like the whole rotten system is collapsing on itself. One of Katie's smartest moves during this sequence is using public attention as a weapon. Earlier in the story, visibility was mostly a curse. Being seen meant being attacked. But now she starts turning that same force against her enemies. By broadcasting what is happening, she creates a new kind of chaos, one that Louis can't fully control. This is a clever payoff because it shows Katie has learned how the world works. She understands that in a society obsessed with spectacle, exposure can become power. Meanwhile, Noel finally gets his emotional confrontation with Louis. This is not only a physical conflict. It is also about truth. Noel has spent years carrying guilt that never belonged to him. Facing Louis means facing the lie that shaped his life. So even though the movie keeps its comedic tone, there is real emotional release in these scenes. Noel is not just fighting a villain. He is reclaiming his own sense of self. Louis, for his part, fully reveals who he is by the end. Any remaining mask falls away. He is ruthless, selfish, and willing to sacrifice anyone for advantage. If Noel represents flawed humanity trying to do better, Louis represents ambition with no conscience at all. Katie also gets her own victory in the climax because she stops being just the person everyone is chasing and becomes the person making the crucial moves. She does not suddenly transform into an unstoppable action hero in an unrealistic way, but she becomes brave, quick-thinking, and willing to take control. The final act rewards her growth by allowing her to influence the outcome directly rather than simply being rescued. Still, defeating Lewis is not enough. The movie keeps the pressure alive by reminding us of the original rule: Katie must survive until sundown. Even after all the personal and physical battles, time remains the final obstacle. That is a smart structural choice because it keeps the core premise active until the very end. No matter how many enemies fall, the countdown is what really matters. And when Katie finally makes it past the deadline, it feels earned. She has gone from a struggling former child actor looking for another chance to a woman who survived a system designed to consume her. She did not win because she was the strongest person in the city. She won because she adapted, trusted the right person, and refused to become as selfish as the world around her. Noel also gets a kind of victory that matters just as much as money. He gets closure. He learns the truth about his team. He understands that his guilt was manipulated and misplaced. That kind of emotional freedom is something he probably needed even more than his percentage of the jackpot. The ending then shows us what happens after all this madness. Rather than becoming corrupted by wealth the way so many others in the movie were, Katie and Noel tried to use the money in a better way. They build a new life, and depending on how you read the ending, the film suggests they want to create something more ethical out of the chaos they survived. This matters thematically because the movie is not saying money itself is always evil. Instead, it suggests that money reveals character. It magnifies whatever is already inside people. For the greedy, it becomes an excuse for cruelty. For better people, it becomes a tool. And that's the story of Jackpot. If you enjoyed this movie explanation, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more amazing movie stories. And tell me in the comments, would you survive this deadly lottery, or would you run away the moment you heard the rules? See you in the next video.